You're listening to episode 62 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm sharing with you why and how to do a digital detox. So stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm your host as always, and today you're just getting me. This is a solo episode. I try to do a solo episode once a month. To be honest, I tend to enjoy interviews a little bit better. There's been a lot of talking to screens this year, and I don't know if I've ever really been 100% in love with talking to screens. I like talking to people, and I like talking to people in real life when possible. But this year has been a lot of recording into a screen, basically. So for better or worse, I like to have conversations. And so doing these solo episodes is a little bit more challenging for me. But all of that said, I do have a lot of things I want to share with you guys. And so doing these solo episodes is the best way for me to do that. And today I wanted to talk about digital detoxes. You know, the idea of doing a detox sometimes can be a little poo-pooed in the nutrition space these days, especially if you're more into some of that like intuitive eating or health at every size stuff. But the fact is that there are times of our lives that we do need to detox from the things that are not good for us. And it's not just necessarily about food or sugar or alcohol or something that you're consuming a lot of orally, like, you know, eating or drinking a lot of that's not making your body feel so great. Sometimes it's things that we're consuming in our minds or thoughts that we're having or, you know, things that we're watching or activities that we're doing or ways that we're spending our time that are actually creating problems in our lives that need to be quote unquote detoxed. So I wanted to talk about digital detoxes today, partially because by the time this episode's coming out, we're getting towards the end of the year. It's going to be Christmas in a couple of days. And I think that this time of year is a time that we can either slow down and spend that time with our family and friends if we're able to. I know that this year is going to be different for a lot of people, but for those of us who are able to see our family or friends during this time, it's an opportunity to slow down, to have some more relationship building time, and to get off the screens, get off the computer, get off the phone, not do as much work. At least that's what my plans are. So I think it's timely to have this conversation now when this is going to be a good opportunity for a digital detox. Now, I am coming off of doing a personal digital detox last week. It was earlier, I guess maybe technically the end of November was when I did this trip to do what I like to consider a digital detox. And basically what I did was I went to a place in Asheboro, North Carolina called Getaway House. Now, Getaway House is essentially like a little shipping container cabin in the woods. It had a bed, it had a little kitchen, a little table, and a little bathroom inside of it. It was super cute, super cozy. I went by myself. Well, technically I had my dog with me. So Levi was there with me. And I went without my husband, not because I didn't want him there, but because he was up in Ohio on a hunting trip when I was there. So he goes hunting every year after Thanksgiving. And I decided this year, instead of just sitting at home doing nothing or doing work, which is what I'm prone to be doing when my husband's not around, I wanted to do a tech detox. And so I booked a 3-night stay at this getaway house and decided to leave all my tech at home except for my phone. I had to bring my phone because I don't have another phone. So it's not like I didn't want to be like completely unreachable. And also I'm not familiar with that particular area. So I needed the maps option. So I did bring my phone. And I guess technically my Kindle was technically technology, although I feel like if anyone owns a Kindle, you know that they're not exactly like a normal tech piece where you're like scrolling mindlessly through social media or like browsing the internet, that kind of thing. So I intentionally left that stuff at home and I brought some books. I brought my Bible. I brought a devotional that I was working on. And I brought hiking gear because I knew that there was some hikes in the area that I was going to be able to go on and the weather was going to be really nice. So that's what I brought to this getaway house. My intention was to use the opportunity to disconnect from tech as much as possible. And I definitely have realized, I don't know, I got to say this year has got to be worse for me. I don't know if it's worse for anybody else, but it's definitely worse for me when it comes to tech addiction. Tech addiction is definitely a real thing. And I realized that I have been training my brain over it's probably been more than the last year, but I feel like 2020 has been especially bad for my own tech use. And the more I use it, the more my brain craves it. And it desires that technology exposure. It desires, the use of certain apps like social media or the news app on my phone. It's something that it has generally become almost like a mindless habit. And it's not so mindless that I'm not aware of it, but it's definitely something that I've noticed has been becoming a lot worse this year. I think this year I've probably read more or like looked at more news information this year than I have in the last 10 years. I'm not even joking about that. Like I generally am somebody who tries to not really get super involved in following politics or current events or anything. And maybe that sounds really ignorant or immature or something, but I just find that stuff is not really helpful for me living my best life and for me being the best person that I can be and helping people in the way that I'm capable and qualified to help them in. So keeping up with all that stuff has never really been something I'd been interested in. So it wasn't really like I had to try not to look at it. I just really had no interest. And then this year with COVID and then the election and all of the Black Lives Matter stuff happening over the summer, like this has just been a year that was very difficult to not be paying attention to the news. And I'm not saying it was impossible because I definitely know people that did it successfully, but it felt very difficult for me. Now, I do think that there's some value in being aware of what's going on and looking outside of your own personal space to, pay attention to what's happening in other people's lives. And I know some people will say that it's privileged to be able to ignore what's going on in the world around you, but I do feel like the amount of information that we're exposed to at this stage of our society's development is not normal. Like if you think about it, even 20 years ago, there wasn't this constant nonstop exposure to other people's lives all the time. And so as much as I want to be informed and to see different perspectives and to make sure I'm not just like living in my own little bubble, I also think that there's a lot of unnatural amount of information being streamed at us constantly, especially with what other people's lives are experiencing. And so I just don't feel like that constant stream of information is valuable to me. And it's actually in a lot of ways harmful to me and my ability to help people the way I want to help them. There's been research that shows a correlation between excessive technology use and anxiety. And I know this year has been a little bit higher on the anxiety level for me in a lot of ways. I mean, there's definitely ways that it's been reduced. There's been a lot of growth and positive experiences that I've had in my personal and professional life, my entrepreneurial life. But when it comes to paying attention to what's going on in the world, there's been a lot more anxiety about that for me than ever before. I feel like this is, many, many times more than I've ever really experienced before. And I also notice I've been spending a lot more time on my devices than ever before. And I know I'm not the only one. A recent Forbes study showed that 3 out of 5 people claim that they spend more time on their digital devices than they do with their partners, which I hate hearing that. And I hate thinking that that could be me. that information or that knowledge really hits home because I don't see my husband much during the week. And because he works and I have my own job, and a lot of times I'm working later than he is. And sometimes I work on the weekends here and there. And I go out of town or he goes out of town. Like, we actually don't see each other a ton. And so when we do spend time together, I've noticed this year, because of like quarantine and all of that kind of stuff, a lot of our time spent together is watching TV or watching a movie. Or sometimes, I hate to admit it, we're just sitting on the couch together, scrolling our own phones. Like, maybe he's playing a Star Wars video game on his phone and I'm like scrolling through Instagram. And I don't like that we spend so much time doing that. Now, I think, we definitely spend quality time together and we talk and we go on walks together. And when we have the opportunity to go out for dinner and stuff like that, like, we definitely do. But because so much stuff has been closed this year, it's just been this thing where it's like, okay, well, I guess another date night is like take out a movie in our living room. And it's just become this habit where we end up being on our phones a lot more than I think we ever had been before or even want to be. And I know I don't want to look back on my life and regret wasting quality time with my husband, like being on screens or scrolling through Pinterest or whatever I'm doing that is really a big waste of time. Now, I say this, I'm admitting all of this stuff to you to help you see if you're experiencing this, that you're definitely not alone. And I want you to know that it's an area of my life that I think is probably one of the most problematic as far as choices that I make or habits that I have. I think a lot of the problematic habits that I've had in the past are things that I've really effectively dealt with. So things like over-exercising or constantly dieting or thinking negative thoughts about myself or, overworking or all the different things that I think I've really managed to get under control. All of that stuff is way better. And so now my main focus for self-improvement, other than just growing my business, which I feel like is a never-ending self-improvement process, I feel like this tech addiction is something that I really want to break. And maybe that'll be my 2021 goal. I don't know. I feel like I've seen some memes lately that it's like, I don't hear anybody talking about how 2021 is going to be their best year ever. It's probably because we're like hedging our bets for what 2020 was. But I think even thinking through New Year's resolutions or, goals or things that I really want to accomplish, I feel like for me, breaking this addiction to tech is something that's really, really important to me. And I know there's different levels of tech addiction. I mean, I definitely don't think I'm so addicted that it's like affecting my work life or affecting my sleep or anything like that, where I'm like staying up until 2:00 in the morning or something. So it's definitely not to that level. But it is something that I think is causing harm in my life, even if it's subtle or something that, maybe is normal, a normal amount of social media use or a normal amount of screen use. So I don't know about you guys, but I don't really want to live a quote unquote normal life. I want to live an extraordinary life. I want to look back on my life and feel really proud of how I spent my time and really proud of the things I accomplished and feel like I made the most out of circumstances and made the most out of my gifts and my talents and the things that God gave me. So part of that is not looking back on my life and being like, I spent 3 hours a day, every day for, my entire 30s on my screen or on my phone or something like that. So all of that said, I definitely want to start reducing my tech use. I want to be more mindful of how I'm using things like social media, just paying attention to news, that kind of thing. The big problem is that social media and really mainstream media in general, like the news and everything, it is designed to be addictive. So, it's not just like this weird thing that we are, oh my gosh, look at that. Like we are getting addicted to it. It's literally designed to be like that. It was created and it's being refined by people in technology that are learning human behavior and are applying that information to make their services more addictive. If you've seen the documentary, The Social Dilemma, it was very eye-opening because that documentary showed us how social media has been designed to hijack our brains, literally, and make us want to spend more and more time on the apps. That's how these things are designed to really make our brains crave more time on it. And that's because our attention is literally a commodity now. It's something that companies are spending a lot of money trying to get as much of it as possible. So us paying attention to these apps is really valuable for big corporations and big tech. Now, also our data is a commodity as well. I'm not going to get into that since, we could kind of go down some like conspiracy rabbit holes there as far as what our data is being used to accomplish. But even just our attention and the amount of time we're spending engaging with that platform, that is something that is very valuable to a lot of companies, and including the tech companies that have created those platforms. Having spent money on Facebook ads myself, I hate to admit it because I really would love to be able to, grow my business and scale my business without having to give money to Mark Zuckerberg. But, it kind of isn't an option right now if I want to get my business in front of new clients and new audience. So listen, I get it. Like I'm one of those people that's paying Facebook to get more eyeballs on my stuff. I'm not saying it's totally evil and that we should all just like ignore it and never look at it again. But I do think it's something we really want to be taking seriously. And I know I don't want companies to have that level of control over how I spend my time, what I'm thinking about, the thoughts that I have, or even the things I feel that are worth investing in. I noticed, especially over the Black Friday period of time last month, it was like, I just was finding myself like buying a lot of stuff. And I was thinking, if I wasn't using these social media platforms, would I even know that these things were on sale? And would I even want to purchase these things? I mean, I try really hard to not buy stuff that's completely random. And I usually will buy things that I actually wanted. But there's definitely times where I find myself pressing that like buy now button. And I'm like, I wouldn't have even known about that had I not seen that ad on Facebook or Instagram. So I'm just noticing that these tech companies are exerting a lot of control over me, and I am not okay with that. And so one of the things I really want to do for myself is to break away from that and to really get back full control over my mind and to not have technology be unduly influencing me. Now, when I was at this getaway house, I'd brought some books with me, and some of those books were things that helped solidify some of this thinking process. One of the books I read was called Switch on Your Brain. That book is by Dr. Caroline Leaf, and she's a really cool author because she takes a really unusual approach to neuroscience. She incorporates actual neuroscience, so, brain structure and brain functioning and all of that. She combines that with quantum physics, which if you don't know what quantum physics are, I would just Google it because I don't even think I can explain it super well. But basically, quantum physics is more about energy and vibrations and how those things are all connected throughout the universe and how matter is actually in motion all the time. And like I said, I am not a quantum physicist, so I'm not going to try to explain it. I'll probably butcher it. But there's a lot of science about that stuff, and it's really, really cool, really interesting how it affects our health, our experience of life, our happiness, even how it can affect the rest of the world. So there's a lot of really cool things. And then the other cool thing Dr. Leaf layers into all of this stuff is scripture. So she's actually showing in this book, Switch on Your Brain, how neuroscience, quantum physics, and scripture all line up together to explain how we can transform our minds and transform our thoughts and really renew our minds so that we have the right kind of thoughts. They're good thoughts, they're joyful thoughts, they're peaceful thoughts, they are self-controlled thoughts. All of the fruits of the Spirit, if you guys are Christian, you'll hopefully know what I'm talking about. Those fruits of the Spirit are things that we can cultivate in our minds, but it takes work, it takes effort, it takes constant, thinking about the things and operating in a way that's going to create that way of thinking. So this was a really great book to read on my digital detox getaway trip. And I'd say one of the biggest takeaways that I learned from that book is that our brains are always changing. From the day that we're born to the day that we die, our brains are changing. This is something called neuroplasticity. It basically means our brains are constantly improving or they're constantly degrading. Like it's one or the other. Our brains are not stagnant. The good news about this is that means we're always able to get smarter. Our brains are incredible. They are able to learn new things, learn new skills, learn new thought patterns, eliminate bad thought patterns. All of that stuff is something that we're always capable of doing, even as we get older, or if we've experienced some kind of brain injury. Our brain is able to repair and renew itself all the time, which is absolutely amazing. We were created in the image of God, and I think that this is one very clear example of that, and it's incredible to me. That's the good news. The bad news is that we can also be getting dumber because of the choices that we're making and the things that we're exposing ourselves to. And just like our brain can be improving and getting more intelligent and getting more capable and getting more, self-controlled and positive and all of those really great things that we want, it can be going in the other direction. So we can get less self-controlled. We can get more negative. We can get more anxious. We can have bad thoughts that are ruminating in our brains all the time. We can have fear that's always in the background of everything that we're thinking. We can have less ability to understand stuff because we're not using our brains in a way that increases our intelligence. So it's something that's really serious. If we're not using our brains in a way that's beneficial, then we're going to be losing our ability to use our brains effectively, and it can really create some pretty bad things in our lives. And what I realized, kind of my aha moment after reading this book, was that every time I pick up my phone and start scrolling social media or scrolling through my news app, I'm literally making myself dumber. Like, that's what I'm telling myself. I try to remind myself that every time I catch myself getting sucked into my phone, scrolling, whatever, I say to myself, you're making yourself dumber right now. And maybe that sounds really harsh, but that's a really effective way for me to be like, nope, not doing this. Turn the phone off. Don't want to be having that happening. I don't want to be dumber. I want to be growing in my intelligence and my capabilities and, just constantly seeing what new heights I can reach. And if I'm taking actions like scrolling on my phone for an hour that are actually causing me to be dumber, that's not a good choice for me to be making. And so I like to take back control and put that phone down and remind myself that there are better ways to spend my time that actually help my brain get smarter and improve itself. So I hope that this is valuable for you to kind of hear behind the scenes of my thought process, because again, I don't want you to feel like you're alone. I don't feel ashamed of it. I just think it's not something that I just want to accept, right? I feel like a lot of our self-improvement changes can come from that feeling of shame or feeling like we're not good enough. And a lot of times that's why we don't succeed in making those changes that we want to make. I am very much of the mindset that self-improvement should come from loving ourselves and wanting ourselves to have the best life possible and believing that we deserve to experience our best life and believing that we have a purpose that we were created for, and that by expressing our highest level of intelligence and capabilities and growing in our skills and growing in our knowledge and growing in our intellectual capacity, that's actually going to help us live out that purpose. So I like to take the mindset that if I have a bad habit that is affecting me negatively, it doesn't make me a bad person. It just means that I'm not living the best life that I could be living. And it's my responsibility to do what needs to be done to change that situation and to take back control of my habits and my choices and the things that I think about and the things that I expose myself to. I know that was a lot, a little bit heavy, but my hope is that you will be inspired by this episode to think about the ways that you're spending your time and how that's affecting your brain functioning. A lot of times we don't think about our brains as being something that is constantly changing. And so if we just kind of go with the same stuff all the time, it kind of just feels routine and it just feels like, oh, that's just our habit. But the more we do those habits, whether they're good habits or bad habits, the more they get ingrained into our brain structure. Our brain literally changes its physical form. We grow certain neurons. We strengthen neurological connections. There's literal physical change that happens in our brains when we do these same things over and over, when we have these same thoughts over and over. And so our brains don't stay the same ever. They're always changing. And that gives us the power to decide, are we going to allow our brains to change in a positive direction? Or are we going to allow our brains to change in a negative direction? There's no in between. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to stay the way I am forever. Just going to chill here. We're always going in one of those directions. And so my hope is that this episode can inspire you to take a little bit of an inventory of your own habits, your own way that you're spending your time, and just ask yourself, like, is this thing that I spend my time doing, is this helping my brain grow in a positive way and get smarter and get more capable and get more knowledgeable and powerful? Or is this thing that I'm spending my time doing making my brain slower, dumber, less capable, whatever kind of word you want to use? And then decide how much time you want to spend doing that. Now, listen, I get sometimes we just need to watch a silly show, like watch The Office and have a glass of wine and just chill out and not think about serious things. I'm not saying that every single moment of our day has to be spent growing in intellectual capacity, but I will say that we need to be mindful of the balance of time. And if we're spending the bulk of our free time doing things that are dumbing down our brain, then we definitely want to make some changes and see how can we start to add stuff to our lives that are helping to grow our mental capacity, even if we still like to have our little, our moment watching TV and just having a little bit of a chill out time where we're not taking things too seriously. So all of that said, I wanted to give you some ideas about how to do a digital detox. If this is something that you are thinking about, or I've inspired you today to take some action around, I wanted to share some actual practical tips of strategies that you can use to implement a digital detox. Now, there's some that are very serious and very cold turkey almost kind of strategies, and we'll talk about those. And then there's some that are a little bit more like dipping a toe into the digital detox waters. I want you to do what you think is best for you. I think behavior change can happen in increments and work really well that way, or sometimes people really benefit from a massive change all at once. And so you need to think about you and what tends to work best for you and to take action in a way that supports your ability to make those changes. So my first tip would be to do what I did and take a trip to somewhere where tech is discouraged. Maybe it's actually banned in certain cases, or it just doesn't work as well. Some of these places that you go off to, like a cabin in the woods, you may not even have service out there. So it's not even possible to use social media or, look at the news or anything like that. I really loved doing the getaway house. I think it was really cool to be able to have that purposeful trip away from work, to get out of the house, to get out of my normal routine, to be surrounded by nature, to be, in some solitude. Again, I think next time I go, I will probably bring my husband, but it was really a nice break to just not have to talk to anybody. I mean, I talked to my dog, but other than the dog, I didn't really have to have any conversations with anybody. And it was just a really nice reset. Unfortunately, my service was pretty good. Like, pros and cons to that. Obviously, there's some certain circumstances where you want your cell phone reception to be good, but I didn't have the experience of having bad service, which would have forced me to be 100% off my phone. So I definitely had to be more mindful of putting my phone in the lockbox that they had. They had this little wooden box with a clasp on it that didn't lock per se, but it was like a decision to put the phone in the box and to shut it away and to kind of forget about it. So that was something that I definitely took advantage of. I will say I spent more time on my phone than I think I even wanted to, which kind of just showed me the level of addiction that my brain has developed to tech and to social media and to news and everything. And so I just, knowing that I had gone in there hoping that I would be totally off it and still using it some, even if it was just like an hour a day or something, it still was more than I wanted to use it. So, definitely taking advantage of lock boxes, or if you're at a place where it doesn't have good service, that'll keep you from using your phone. And then there are some retreat centers that you can go to that they literally take your phone from you when you get there and you can't have your phone at all. Now that's the real serious choice to do that. I would be totally up for that. I don't know if those are available right now. Obviously, COVID's kind of affected a lot of travel opportunities, but that would be like the serious step to go somewhere that they literally take your phone and put it away and you can't have it until you leave. So that's for those of you who want to go all in on the tech detox. Mine was still more extreme in the sense that I left my home and I left all my devices except for my phone. And I was hoping to have a little bit less service, but we had service. So I had to be more mindful of it. But it was a good way to kind of disrupt the mental patterns that I have with what I'm usually doing when I wake up in the morning, getting on the computer or going on the phone or whatever. I'm usually getting onto a screen relatively quickly when I first get up in the morning, which is not ideal. And it's something that I want to stop doing. So that was a good way to kind of break that habit just by being in a new location and having just a different environment that didn't necessarily trigger the same kind of behaviors as I would do at home. So another option, if you can't necessarily go somewhere out of the house, would be to buy a timed lockbox. So they do sell these on Amazon, for example. I think one of the main brands is called Kitchen Timer. And it's something that it's like this little container that you can literally set a timer on the lid and it'll lock for a certain amount of time. And so I think you could do it for like days, if not like a week or something. I would say maybe you don't want to do it for that long at first. Maybe it's just a couple of hours at a time that you put your phone in. Maybe if you're feeling adventurous, you do a full 24 hours and go a whole day without your phone. I think doing it for more than a few days might be kind of tough for some of us, especially if we need to be able to communicate with our family or, have a map when we're driving, something like that. But I do think that the lock boxes that are based on a timer can be a great way to make that decision to say, I'm not going to use my phone for the next 3 hours, put it in there, lock it up. And unless you're going to take a sledgehammer to it, you're not going to be able to use your phone. So that's an option. And another option would be if you're going out of the house, you could leave your phone at home. I was thinking about this when I was preparing for this episode about how, remember when we used to drive places and we didn't have a phone with us and it was okay. Like I remember in high school, and now to be fair, I got my first phone at 16 and my parents allowed us to get a phone as soon as we were driving, which I guess, if you're older than me, I'm in my early 30s. Maybe if you're like 40, you didn't even have that option to have a phone. I don't think my husband had a phone until he was in college. So, if you're a little bit older than me, you might remember a time that you were really doing a lot of driving without a phone. But I just remember, we had to like stop and use a phone at a store or use a pay phone or something like that if we didn't have a phone. And it's weird how I feel like we've gotten to this place where we feel so vulnerable when we don't have our phones. But I really think that we can take more opportunities to leave our phone at home. I would say you could start with some local trips, like maybe you go to the grocery store without your phone, or you go to a coffee shop without your phone. Start with those local trips that you're not going to need a map and you're not going to get lost. And you really just don't need your phone with you to be able to do what you need to do, or to be able to, if you're at a coffee shop and you want to go read a book, if your phone's not there, you're going to be totally fine. So I think just getting out of the house, if possible, again, different states have different COVID guidelines right now. So if you're in a state like where I live, you can still go to a coffee shop. Hopefully at this point when the episode is coming out, I know there's other places that are a lot more shut down. But either way, if you have that opportunity in the future to go somewhere and not bring your phone, or maybe you go out to dinner with your husband and you both don't bring your phone with you, like that is something that you should generally be okay doing. And even if it's not that you don't bring your phone with you, but maybe you just leave the phone in the car, right? Like you don't bring it into the restaurant or into the coffee shop with you. I think that's a way to start detaching from the phone and being okay not having it and not reaching for it when you're bored or reaching for it when you're waiting in line or something like that, and really just getting away from that habit of using it whenever you have a moment of empty space. So leaving your phone at home, leaving it in the car, that would be another way to start detaching from tech. Another good option is to delete specific apps off your phone, especially things like social media, like Facebook, Instagram, those kind of apps that really are designed to suck you in. Those are things that you don't have to have on your phone. Now, you can always add them back later. So if you delete them, it's not like they're gone for good. You're not going to lose all your photos or anything like that. But maybe you want to take a week off of having that app on your phone, especially if you're a business owner. I mean, I know for me, like I feel like there's days where I feel pressure to be posting or putting stories on Instagram or something. And I think it's pretty true that nobody's going to miss like my stories if I'm gone for a week, right? Like I don't think I have any people that are going to be devastated if they don't see my stories show up on their news feed for a week. And so if you delete those apps off your phone, yeah, technically you can just like use the internet browser to look at that stuff, but it's not as easy. And especially if you're signed out of the app, it just makes it really hard to access. And the more difficult it is to use the app, the less you're going to want to use it. And so you can kind of create that barrier for yourself to minimize how much time you're spending on those apps and just spend a couple of weeks, maybe not using those apps and really breaking your addiction to them. I have friends that have done this, and most of them that have done it never ended up adding the app back, which I think says a lot. Now, I do think if you are a business owner, I mean, and this can work for a person as like a just, regular person that's not a business owner, but for business owners, you would want to potentially announce your social media vacation. Like if you're used to posting several days a week, or you're used to being on stories a lot, and you don't want to just like ghost on your audience, you can tell people I'm, taking a social media vacation from this day to this day. I'll see you back here, on January 1st or something like that. And so that way people are not thinking that you're ignoring them or wondering how to get in touch with you or anything like that, because you've made an announcement that you're going to be off the app for a little bit of time. Now, if you're not ready to delete the apps, then you could at least start either unfollowing or muting those accounts that keep you scrolling for too long, or those that affect your mental health. I personally went through my Instagram recently and eliminated any accounts that posted news or political information or anything that's like way more politically engaging. I didn't follow a ton of accounts like that, and pretty much all of them are new for this year because, as I mentioned before, I was never really into news or politics. I was like happily ignorant about that stuff. And I started following a lot more this year because of everything that's been going on and trying to like figure out like what exactly is happening and like who's got the right information, which I really feel like nobody does. But I just was recently thinking like these accounts, yes, I'm sure they have good information and I'm sure there's some value to them. But right now in this stage of my life, all I feel when I see the content that they put up is anxiety. And there's really no benefit to that. That does not help me help anybody anymore if I'm feeling anxious. And I just don't want to be somebody who is living and dying by what's happening in the news or what's happening in the political space or anything like that. So I just was like, you know what? All of these accounts that I'm following this year that were new to me, and yeah, they were interesting, and yeah, I learned some stuff, it's time to get rid of them. So I literally just unfollowed them all, and I'm probably still going to unfollow more accounts. I was playing around with the idea of literally unfollowing to get to a place of 0 and then like starting to refollow people that are really important to me. I don't know if I've gotten the guts to do that just yet, but future reference, if you ever see me unfollow you and you're like, oh, what did I do? Just know that maybe it was just me doing a little bit of a complete cull of my following list. So now I know that sometimes we're not feeling ready to unfollow people. It can feel very like socially awkward to unfollow people. So if you're not ready to do that, then there is on Instagram a mute button. So you can actually mute someone so that they don't show up in your feed anymore unless you unmute them. So that's a great way if you feel like it would be weird to unfollow the person, or you just want to take a break from them and you don't want to have that awkward like, oh, I'm going to follow them again. Like what happened? Then you can use the mute button. So that way you're not getting exposed to their content for a while. And who knows, maybe you won't miss it and you'll never go back and unmute them and you'll never, even miss them being gone off your feed. So those are some options as well to unfollow or mute accounts that keep you attached to your phone too long, or just kind of create that negative emotion or anxiety when you're on your phone too much. If you're not using your phone, but you're using your computer to look at social media, there's a really cool plugin on Chrome called Newsfeed Eradicator. My coach, Anna Powers, told me about this one, and it's really great, especially because I use Facebook for a lot of my business stuff, and I don't really want to get exposed to the newsfeed when I log on. So this Newsfeed Eradicator plugin actually gets rid of your entire newsfeed when you log into Facebook, and it just has this like inspirational quote that they show you instead of your newsfeed, which is really cool. Honestly, it's like nice to log on and not see anything on the newsfeed. There's no ads. There's no like debates happening. There's no stupid memes that people are sharing. Nothing. Just this positive, inspiring quote. And this is really great, especially if you're someone who needs to use Facebook for business, but you don't want to get sucked into the nonsense that gets posted on people's timelines. Honestly, if I didn't have a business, I'm doubting that I would even be on Facebook. My husband doesn't really use it. My family doesn't really use it. Like nobody that I care about uses Facebook a ton. And so if I didn't have a business, I really think I would be off it a lot more, and maybe even just 100% off it all the time. but it's hard to say because I have a business and I will never not have a business. So I don't really know what that'll look like. But all of that said, it is a really great plugin to have, the newsfeed eradicator, when I do need to jump on Facebook and check on my groups or, participate in my mastermind group or something like that. And I don't want to be sucked into all the craziness that can happen on Facebook. Now, another tool I like is called the Freedom app, and that's one that can block distracting websites off both your computer and your phone. You can actually hook it up so that it's working on both devices, and you can set timers on it. So you can say like every day between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., you don't want to be able to access Facebook, Instagram, CNN.com, FoxNews.com, whatever your news sites are. Like you can give specific sites that you don't want to be able to access. And I do think that this app also has like a general category that you can switch off. So if you hit like news, that'll turn off CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all of the things that would come up for news. Sadly, this doesn't work with iPhone apps. I was hoping that it would when I installed it, but like if you're wanting it to block Instagram, it'll only block Instagram if you're trying to access Instagram on like your internet browser. So if you want it to affect your ability to use social media on an iPhone, I don't know about any other type of phone, but on an iPhone, you have to delete the app. And then if you were trying to access it via like Chrome or Safari or something, you could block it there. But it's nice because it blocks stuff on your computer, and it's something that if you find like you're tending to use those apps during the day, you can set a timer that, I'm going to do this 2 hours of work and I don't want anything to distract me. And that's a great way to avoid distraction. So that's the Freedom app. Another app I used to use was called Self-Control. I don't use that one anymore, but it was a really good one for setting timers to block apps as well. And I used to use that when I would be like jumping on Facebook more in between doing work on the computer. I don't do that so much anymore. When I'm working, I'm really working and I'm not usually like diddling around on Facebook or Instagram or something, but it is something that when I'm out of the work, like I leave my office in my house and I go downstairs and I'm, doing stuff around the house. Sometimes I'll be more active on the phone. And generally for me, the worst hours are between like 8 and 10 p.m. and then probably like when I first wake up in the morning. So I try to make sure that those timers are on so that I'm not able to access as much stuff on my devices at those more high risk times. Now, another thing I changed recently that I didn't know you could do, and this is with an iPhone. So if you have an iPhone and you're on your home screen and you swipe to the right, you get to this, you swipe right, but it's like the thing is coming from the left. You get to this page that kind of shows your iPhone suggested apps. So it's the things that they think you want to see. And pretty much from the minute I got an iPhone, which was like a couple years ago, I forget, I think it was 2017, I got my first iPhone. I always had the news app on that page. And I always just thought it was like, that's the way it is. And maybe they recently changed this. So I actually have no idea if this was something that wasn't changeable before. But, and like I said, until this year, it really wasn't an issue. I honestly really didn't care about the news. I wasn't super paying attention to it. But this year, with the news app, it was like always something that I was like, oh no, California's COVID cases are up to like 1 million or whatever. And it's like, I don't even live in California. Why do I care about that? That's not something that I need to start my day with. And so it's just something that I found myself getting more and more attached to, is like knowing what was happening in the news. And it was something that was really, it just like didn't feel good to swipe to the right and to, want to go search for something on my phone or check notifications or something and see news as the first thing that I saw. So what I realized recently is that you can actually change what apps show up on that suggestion screen. And I got rid of the news app entirely off that screen. So now I don't see news at all. When I swipe to the right and I bring that screen over, I actually see my calendar and I see an illustrated Bible verse from the Bible app because I put it there. So and I'm actually just like looking at my iPhone right now, if I swipe to the right, I see messages. Messages and weather. I forgot. I also see those because I like to know what the weather is going to be. Shout out to my client, Bridget Carroll, who says that she never looks at the weather. It's very funny to me. I'm like, I always need to know what the weather is, but maybe it's because North Carolina is so like unpredictable. But so I see my calendar and I see an illustrated Bible verse, and then I see podcasts and Spotify information, and then some other little random, like, I think one of them is like a screen time notifications. So right now I'm seeing like 44 minutes of screen time today, which is okay for the phone. It's not great. I wish it would be less than that, but it is what it is. And so I put specific apps on that page so that I'm not getting exposed to things that are stressful, and I'm getting exposed to things that are uplifting, like that Bible verse. And that's a really simple thing to change. Is just, if you're normally seeing news the first thing in the morning when you get up, maybe getting rid of that and not looking at the news until, after breakfast or something would be a good thing to do. So trying to customize your phone as much as possible so that certain apps are not showing up is a good opportunity as well. And then the last thing I would recommend, well, actually, I have two more things. So the most important thing that I think everybody should do, especially entrepreneurs, is to turn off as many notifications as possible on your phone. They're called push notifications, and a lot of apps have the option of having push notifications. And that's where you get that little like screen pop up on your phone, or you get a ding if your sound is on, and those should be turned off as much as possible. I pretty much limit my push notifications to the absolute minimum. I'll have them for like texts and calls. I'll have them for important emails. Like I don't even get all my emails as push notifications. I don't get social media push notifications. Those definitely should be turned off no matter who you are. And I just try to generally eliminate as many notifications as possible. I think the email piece is really huge. Like I know a lot of people will get these like dings on their phone when they get an email. I do not do that. I don't even hardly use email. So, that's another podcast for another day. But it is something that even just getting rid of those notifications is really, really valuable. And then I also leave my phone on do not disturb during the workday. So sometimes that gets me into trouble if like I miss an important call, but that do not disturb setting basically makes it so that I don't get any sort of phone calls, texts, like I don't get any noise whatsoever, any buzzing on my phone during my workday. Part of that is because I do things like podcasting and video calls with my group coaching programs and private clients, and I don't want my phone going off during those sessions. But it's also a great way to keep me from grabbing my phone and looking at what the notification is. So getting those notifications off your phone as much as possible is really valuable. And then there's options on the iPhone. I don't know about other phones because I have the iPhone, but on the iPhone, there are limits that you can set for screen time as well as certain types of apps. So you can create app limits on social media. You can create general app limits. You can create screen use limits where if they're like, oh, it's 10 o'clock, turn off all these apps. Like technically you can still access them. They don't lock them entirely, but at least reminds you like, hey, you're supposed to be off these now. So creating those limits on your phone can be really valuable. I also put an alert into my calendar on my phone that says, tech downtime or something. I forget what the exact alert is, but basically at 9 o'clock every day, it shows up and says like turn off tech or something like that. So I don't always follow it. And so sometimes these reminders are not the most useful things, but at least I see that notification on my phone that says turn off tech, and I'll try to remember to turn things off at least for a little bit. The goal is to get to an hour of tech-free time from 8 to 9 p.m., but or maybe it's 9 to 10. I can't remember which hour it is, but basically I set that hour as being an hour to not use screens. Doesn't always work that way. Hoping to be a little bit better about it next year, especially as hopefully this quarantine stuff hopefully gets better. I'm really crossing my fingers about this, but just hoping to have more non-screen activities to do. And I know that that's a choice as well, even with the quarantine stuff. I know it's a decision of if I'm going to be spending my time watching TV or being on the computer, or if I'm going to do something like reading a book or journaling or a coloring book or something just a little bit more mentally calming. And so we'll see what happens if we are able to get out of the house more and everything. But if we're not, then I know it's going to be a matter of me choosing to make those changes. All right. So those are my tips for doing a digital detox. I hope that this episode has helped you understand why a digital detox would be so important, why I'm so committed to making these changes, even though they're hard. They really are hard. I'm not a superwoman here that just like snaps her fingers and all of a sudden everything I want in my life is perfect. There's a lot of stuff that I too have challenges with. And so this is one of the main challenges I am working through right now. So At the risk of being very hypocritical, I would love to hear from you. Feel free to DM me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Laura Schoenfeld RD. And I would love to know if you are interested in this idea of a digital detox or any sort of habits that can help you be using technology less. I would just love to hear what you're doing, if there's anything that's working well for you. And like I said, I know that it's ironic for you to jump on Instagram and tell me about this, but unfortunately, there's going to be some kind of screen associated with our communication at this point if you want to share this with me. So whether that is an email or a Instagram DM or whatnot, like we're going to end up being on a screen to chat with each other. So I'm willing to get on Instagram to chat with people like you who want to share your experience and share your feedback. And let me know if you have any great tips for implementing a digital detox. I would love to hear them. All right, well, that's it for me today. I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday if you're listening to this the week of Christmas in 2020. I will look forward to seeing you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast, and I wish you all the best for a happy holiday season. I'll talk to you later, guys.
Hey there, Laura here again. Thank you so much for listening to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Your time is your most precious resource, and I'm so grateful that you choose to spend some of it with me. Now, if you're enjoying the podcast and want to continue supporting my work on this show, I would very much appreciate it if you would leave a review on iTunes. By leaving a 5-star review, you'll help others find the show and help me spread my message to a larger audience. You can go to fedandfearless.com/review to find a button that'll take you right to iTunes to leave your review. And I have a special gift for you as a thank you for helping me share the podcast. Once you leave your review, send a screenshot of the review to hello@lauraschoenfeldrd.com. Or you can DM it to me on Instagram @lauraschoenfeldrd. Once you do, I'll share a free copy of my Overcoming Undereating ebook. Then share a favorite podcast episode in your Instagram stories and tag me @lauraschoenfeldrd. And I'll also give you a free copy of my 14-day calorie challenge recipe guide. Together, these bonuses are worth $44 and will help you become Fed and Fearless. And you'll get them absolutely free for just helping me grow the podcast. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you here next week for the latest episode.